I'm Samantha Rodriguez, 28 years old, and I thought I'd seen every possible way my family could disappoint me. I was wrong. Boxing Day evening, while still nursing the wounds from being completely ignored during Christmas dinner, my phone buzzed with an email that made my blood run cold. The subject line read, "Car repair bill, payment due immediately." Inside was an itemized invoice for $25,000 for my sister Madison's BMW repairs after she crashed it into a streetlight. The message was brief but devastating: "Samantha always helps family. We know you understand." They thought I'd just pay quietly like I always did. They were completely and utterly wrong. Before we dive into this unbelievable story of family betrayal and financial manipulation, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Are you team family loyalty or team boundaries? Hit that like button if you've ever felt taken advantage of by family, subscribe for more shocking family drama stories, and buckle up because this tale of revenge and justice is about to get wild. Let's jump right into how my picture-perfect family Christmas turned into the beginning of the most expensive lesson they'd ever learn. Growing up as the oldest Rodriguez child came with unspoken expectations that I foolishly embraced for years. As a marketing manager at a successful tech company, I earned $85,000 annually and had managed to save $150,000 through careful budgeting and smart investments. My apartment was modest, my car reliable but not flashy, and my lifestyle deliberately simple because I'd always been the family's safety net. My younger sister Madison, 25 years old, had never held a steady job but lived like a trust fund baby thanks to our parents' endless financial support and my own misguided generosity. Our parents, Robert and Helen Rodriguez, had mastered the art of being strict disciplinarians with me while treating Madison like spun glass that might shatter if she faced any consequences. My track record as the family ATM was extensive and painful to review. Madison's college tuition when she dropped out after 2 years, $40,000. My brother Derek's wedding when his business couldn't cover the costs, $15,000. Emergency money for our parents when Dad's car needed repairs, $20,000. Every crisis somehow became my responsibility to solve, and I'd always stepped up because that's what good daughters do, right? The pattern had become so established that my family didn't even ask anymore. They simply informed me of their financial needs and expected compliance. This Christmas had started like many others, with me spending $3,000 on thoughtful gifts for everyone. I'd bought Dad a premium tool set he'd been eyeing, Mom an expensive jewelry box she'd mentioned wanting, Derek's kids the latest gaming console, and Madison a designer handbag she'd been posting about on social media for months. Christmas Eve arrived with my usual excitement to see everyone. But the moment I walked into our family home, I felt like an unwelcome guest at my own family gathering. Madison's brand new BMW sat in the driveway like a gleaming monument to parental favoritism, a Christmas gift that had cost more than my entire year's rent. Inside the house, the dynamic was immediately clear. Madison held court in the living room, showing off the BMW's features to relatives while our parents beamed with pride. When I tried to join the conversation, the group seemed to shift away from me, leaving me standing awkwardly on the periphery of what should have been my own family celebration. Dinner was worse. I found myself seated at the far end of the table, next to my 10-year-old nephew, while Madison sat in the place of honor next to our parents. Throughout the meal, conversation flowed around me but rarely included me. When someone did address me, it was usually to ask when I planned to get married or buy a house, questions that felt more like criticisms of my life choices than genuine interest. The gift exchange was the final humiliation. Madison opened present after present, including a $5,000 jewelry set from our parents, while exclaiming over each expensive item. When my turn came, I unwrapped a $15 bath towel set that still had the clearance sticker on it. The message was crystal clear: my value to this family was purely financial, and my emotional needs were completely irrelevant. I left that night feeling hollowed out and questioning everything I thought I knew about my place in the Rodriguez family tree. 3 days later, Madison's BMW met a streetlight in what I would later learn was an entirely preventable accident. The email arrived that Boxing Day evening with an itemized breakdown that made my head spin. Body work, $18,000. Parts, $4,500. Labor, $2,500. The total came to exactly $25,000, and the accompanying message made it clear that my family viewed this as my problem to solve. The audacity was breathtaking, but what came next would prove that this was only the beginning of their entitled demands. My phone call to decline payment was met with reactions that revealed just how deeply my family's entitlement ran. Dad's voice turned ice cold as he delivered what felt like a prepared speech about ingratitude and family obligations. "After everything we've done for you, Samantha, this is how you repay us? We raised you better than this selfishness." Mom took a different approach, her voice trembling with practiced hurt as she painted herself as the victim of my cruelty. "I can't believe my own daughter would abandon her sister in her time of need. What have we done wrong as parents?" Madison's contribution was pure theatrical manipulation, sobbing into the phone about how I clearly didn't love her anymore and how she'd never recover from this betrayal. Their coordinated response suggested this wasn't a spontaneous reaction but a calculated strategy they'd prepared for my potential resistance. Within hours of my refusal, my phone buzzed with texts from aunts, uncles, and family friends who'd somehow already heard about my selfishness. Each message followed a similar script, expressing disappointment in my lack of family loyalty and suggesting that successful people like me had obligations to help struggling family members. The speed and coordination of this campaign made it clear that my family had activated their entire network to pressure me into compliance. Social media became their next battlefield. Madison posted tearful Instagram stories about being unable to get to work without her car, complete with dramatic close-ups of her crying face and captions about feeling abandoned by the people who were supposed to love her. Our parents shared Facebook posts about the importance of family unity and helping each other through difficult times, posts that felt clearly directed at me even though my name wasn't mentioned. The comments sections filled with supportive messages from friends and relatives who didn't know the full story, creating a narrative where I was the villain in Madison's tragedy. The family meeting invitation arrived disguised as an olive branch. Derek called personally, his voice warm and conciliatory as he suggested we all sit down together to clear the air about what he termed this Christmas misunderstanding. He positioned himself as the reasonable mediator who just wanted everyone to get along, and I foolishly believed that maybe, finally, someone in my family was willing to acknowledge their problematic behavior. The meeting was scheduled for the following Sunday at our parents' house, and Derek assured me that everyone just wanted to talk through our differences like adults. Walking into that living room felt like entering a courtroom where I was both defendant and judge. Mom had prepared elaborate snacks and coffee, creating an atmosphere of false civility that couldn't mask the tension crackling through the air. Everyone was there, Mom and Dad in their matching recliners, Madison curled up on the couch looking fragile and wounded, Derek and his wife Jennifer sitting together on the love seat. The seating arrangement left me isolated in a single chair facing the rest of the family like I was on trial for crimes against the Rodriguez clan. The conversation started with Derek's carefully prepared speech about family communication and understanding each other's perspectives. He acknowledged that maybe they hadn't expressed enough appreciation for my past generosity, and he suggested we could work out a payment plan for Madison's car repairs that would be manageable for my budget. It all sounded reasonable until I realized the underlying assumption: payment was inevitable, and we were only negotiating terms. When I reiterated my refusal to pay for Madison's accident, the room's atmosphere shifted dramatically. Dad leaned forward in his chair, his businessman's mask slipping to reveal genuine anger. "Let me get this straight, Samantha. You're willing to let your sister suffer because of your pride?" Mom started crying, not the manipulative tears I'd seen before but what seemed like genuine anguish at her family falling apart. Madison accused me of punishing her for our parents' favoritism, as if I was responsible for the family dynamic I'd been victimized by for years. But Derek's reaction was the most shocking of all. "Maybe Samantha has a point," he said slowly, and for a moment I felt a surge of hope that someone was finally taking my side. "But I think we're all forgetting something important here." He pulled out his phone and showed the room a screenshot of my savings account balance, information I'd shared with him months earlier when he'd offered to help me with investment advice. If Samantha has $150,000 sitting in savings, is it really such a hardship to help her sister with $25,000? The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Derek had violated my trust and privacy, sharing information I'd given him in confidence to strengthen the family's case against me. Worse, he'd clearly planned this reveal, timing it for maximum impact when I was already feeling cornered and defensive. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as my parents processed this information, and I could see the calculation in their eyes as they recalibrated their expectations of what I could and should contribute to the family finances. $150,000, Dad repeated slowly, like he was testing how the numbers felt in his mouth. And you're telling us you can't spare $25,000 to help your sister? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning any chance of reasonable discussion. I left that meeting knowing that my relationship with Derek might never recover and that my family's financial expectations had just multiplied exponentially. But I also left with a crystal clear understanding that this war was just beginning, and if they wanted to play dirty, I was about to become their worst nightmare. The demands started arriving within 48 hours of Derek's devastating revelation, each one more outrageous than the last. An email from Dad outlined the family's new fair contribution system, where my savings meant I should contribute $30,000 to a family emergency fund that would help everyone during difficult times. Mom followed up with a request for $10,000 to renovate their perfectly functional kitchen, framing it as an investment in the family home where we'd all gathered for holidays. Madison sent the most brazen demand of all. $5,000 for therapy to help her recover from the trauma of both her car accident and my rejection of her needs. The mathematical precision of their coordinated assault was almost impressive. They'd calculated that $70,000 over 6 months would still leave me with substantial savings while solving all their financial problems. Each family member had crafted their request to sound reasonable in isolation, but together they formed a comprehensive plan to drain my savings account for their benefit. The therapy demand was particularly galling because Madison had never mentioned needing professional help until she realized she could monetize her supposed emotional distress. My refusal to engage with any of these demands triggered an escalation that revealed just how far my family was willing to go to get my money. I found myself completely excommunicated from family communications, blocked from group chats and excluded from all social gatherings. When my cousin Sarah got engaged, I learned about the family celebration through Facebook photos rather than an invitation. Madison's birthday party happened without my knowledge, and I only discovered it when Derek posted pictures of the elaborate restaurant dinner they'd somehow afforded despite their supposed financial difficulties. The isolation campaign extended beyond just social exclusion. Someone called my workplace asking detailed questions about my salary and financial stability, questions that raised red flags with my HR department and forced me into an uncomfortable conversation with my supervisor. Madison had clearly been stalking my social media accounts because she knew details about my weekend activities that I'd only posted online. When I changed my privacy settings, I started receiving friend requests from fake accounts that bore suspicious resemblances to my family members' writing styles and shared interests. The emotional manipulation reached new heights when Mom claimed to be suffering from heart problems caused by the stress of our family conflict. She sent me medical appointment cards and prescription bottles, evidence of her supposed cardiovascular issues that she blamed directly on my stubbornness. Dad's approach was more cerebral, sending me long emails about family values, gratitude, and the responsibilities that come with financial success. These treatises read like sermons, full of biblical references and moral platitudes designed to make me feel guilty for protecting my own financial security. Derek's wife Jennifer became an unexpected participant in the campaign, sending me carefully worded text messages about how disappointed Derek was in my behavior. She positioned herself as a neutral observer who just wanted family harmony, but her messages were clearly designed to apply additional pressure from someone I'd previously considered an ally. The fact that she was willing to participate in this coordinated harassment revealed how thoroughly Derek had poisoned the well against me. The pressure began taking a real toll on my professional life. The constant stress of family drama was affecting my performance at work, and I found myself making careless mistakes that damaged my reputation with clients. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake analyzing every family interaction for signs I'd missed, wondering if I really was the selfish monster they painted me to be. Anxiety attacks started hitting me at random moments, leaving me gasping for breath in grocery store aisles and parking lots as the weight of their emotional manipulation crushed down on me. My lowest moment came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday when I found myself logged into my banking app, cursor hovering over the transfer button that would send $25,000 to Madison's account. The voices in my head were a chorus of family expectations and guilt. Just pay it and make peace. $25,000 will bankrupt you. Family is supposed to be more important than money. I was literally seconds away from capitulating when my phone rang with a call from my best friend Ashley, who'd noticed my late-night social media activity and called to check on me. Ashley Morrison had been my closest friend since college, and she was the only person in my life who'd consistently called out my family's problematic behavior. As a lawyer specializing in financial crimes, she had a professional understanding of financial abuse that I desperately needed to hear. Her voice cut through my emotional fog like a lighthouse beam, reminding me that healthy families don't conduct coordinated campaigns to extort money from their members. She stayed on the phone with me until dawn, talking me off the ledge of financial surrender and helping me see that my family's behavior wasn't normal or acceptable. That phone call marked a turning point in my understanding of the situation. Ashley's legal perspective helped me recognize patterns of financial abuse I'd been blind to for years. She encouraged me to start documenting every interaction with my family, preserving evidence of their harassment campaign and coordinated pressure tactics. Most importantly, she helped me understand that their escalating demands proved my initial refusal was the right choice, because people who respected boundaries wouldn't respond to no with siege warfare. Ashley's legal expertise proved invaluable as I began investigating my family's true financial situation rather than simply accepting their claims of hardship. Her guidance helped me understand that financial abusers often project false images of neediness while hiding substantial assets, and my family's behavior patterns matched those profiles perfectly. She recommended hiring a private investigator to conduct discreet research into their finances, a suggestion that initially felt extreme but increasingly seemed necessary as their harassment escalated. The private investigator's preliminary report shattered many of my assumptions about my family's financial struggles. Dad's retirement package included a pension of $4,000 per month plus health benefits, hardly the financial stress they'd described. Mom had inherited $200,000 from her mother the previous year, money she'd never mentioned despite asking me for various loans and contributions. Most shocking was the revelation that Derek's supposedly failing business had actually been profitable until recently, when large cash withdrawals had drained the company accounts for unexplained purposes. Madison's financial situation proved even more interesting than I'd expected. The private investigator discovered that she'd been receiving regular payments from a wealthy businessman named Richard Wellington, amounts that exceeded what most people earned from full-time employment. These weren't gifts or loans but structured payments that suggested an ongoing financial arrangement of some kind. The investigator's photos showed Madison meeting with Richard at expensive restaurants and hotels, interactions that contradicted her claims of being financially desperate. Armed with this information, I began setting up systems to protect myself from my family's escalating tactics. Every phone call was recorded using legal apps that preserved evidence of their threatening language and coordinated pressure campaigns. I screenshot every demanding text message and preserved every manipulative email in a dedicated folder that grew larger by the day. The documentation process was emotionally exhausting, forcing me to relive their abuse while preparing for what Ashley warned might become a legal battle. The family's tactics intensified as my resistance continued. Collection agency calls started hitting my phone, claims for debts I'd never incurred but that someone had somehow attached to my name and social security number. Madison filed a police report alleging financial abuse, claiming I'd promised to pay her expenses and then reneged on my commitments. Letters arrived at my workplace questioning my character and suggesting that my employer should investigate potential financial improprieties, obvious attempts to damage my professional reputation. The assault on my career was particularly vindictive because they knew how much my professional success meant to me. Coworkers began asking uncomfortable questions about my family situation after receiving anonymous phone calls suggesting I was involved in some kind of financial dispute. My supervisor called me into his office to discuss personal issues that might be affecting my work performance, a conversation that felt like walking through a minefield of potential career damage. Madison's police report backfired spectacularly when the investigating officer discovered evidence of insurance fraud in her accident report. The private investigator had uncovered bar receipts and social media posts proving Madison had been drinking heavily before her crash, information she'd concealed from both the police and her insurance company. When confronted with this evidence, Madison's credibility crumbled, and the officer suggested I might want to file counter charges for false reporting and harassment. The insurance fraud revelation opened doors to other discoveries about Madison's activities. Richard Wellington wasn't just a sugar daddy providing luxury dinners and shopping money, he was one of several wealthy men Madison had manipulated through elaborate sob stories and fake emergencies. The private investigator found evidence of multiple financial scams, including a fake pregnancy that had cost one man $50,000 and a fabricated medical emergency that had netted another victim $30,000. Derek's knowledge of Madison's criminal activities became clear when I discovered he'd been helping her set up fake social media profiles and email accounts for her scams. Bank records showed that some of Madison's scam money had flowed through Derek's business accounts, explaining both his company's financial problems and his desperate need for my money to cover the shortfalls. The realization that Derek wasn't just betraying my confidence but actively participating in criminal enterprises added another layer of complexity to my family's dysfunction. The evidence painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond simple financial disagreements. My family had been using my money not just for legitimate expenses but to cover the costs of criminal activities and fraudulent schemes. Every dollar I'd contributed over the years had potentially enabled illegal behavior that put multiple victims at risk. The guilt and anger I felt at enabling their activities, even unknowingly, fueled my determination to not just defend myself but to ensure they faced consequences for their actions. Ashley's legal analysis confirmed my worst fears. My family's behavior constituted organized financial abuse with potential criminal implications. The coordinated harassment campaign, the fraudulent debt claims, and the attempts to damage my career all violated multiple laws designed to protect people from exactly this kind of systematic abuse. Most importantly, she assured me that not only was I justified in refusing their demands, but I had grounds to pursue legal action that could result in both financial restitution and criminal charges. My decision to fight back rather than simply defend myself marked a dramatic shift in our family warfare. Ashley helped me understand that financial abusers only respond to consequences, not reasoning, so playing defense would only encourage their escalation. I began my counterattack by posting detailed financial records on Facebook, showing my family's actual assets alongside their demands for my money. The post included screenshots of Derek's business income, Mom's inheritance, and Dad's pension information, creating a public record that exposed their deceptive claims of poverty. The revelation of Madison's sugar daddy relationship proved particularly devastating to her carefully crafted social media persona. I posted bank records showing regular deposits from Richard Wellington alongside Madison's Instagram stories claiming financial hardship, creating an undeniable contrast between her public image and private reality. Photos of her expensive dinners and shopping trips, funded by Richard's money while she demanded my savings, painted a clear picture of manipulative entitlement that resonated with our extended family and community. Derek's business problems became public knowledge when I shared evidence of the large cash withdrawals that had drained his company accounts. The timing of these withdrawals coincided perfectly with Madison's most expensive scams, creating a paper trail that implicated Derek in his sister's criminal activities. His professional reputation in our small business community suffered immediate damage as clients and vendors learned about his financial irregularities and potential involvement in fraudulent schemes. The public exposure triggered a vicious retaliation campaign that proved my family was willing to escalate their warfare beyond anything I'd imagined. Madison pressed criminal charges against me for cyberbullying and harassment, claiming my social media posts had caused her emotional distress and damaged her reputation. She hired a lawyer who specialized in social media cases, someone clearly more expensive than her supposed financial situation should have allowed, and filed for a restraining order that would have prevented me from posting any information about our family conflict. Derek contacted my employer with fabricated stories about my alleged criminal behavior, professional misconduct, and emotional instability. He claimed I'd stolen money from family members, threatened violence against my sister, and was currently under investigation for various financial crimes. The lies were elaborate and detailed enough that my HR department felt compelled to launch a formal investigation, placing my career in jeopardy while they sorted through his false accusations. The most devastating betrayal came from Grandma Rose, the family member I'd trusted most and considered my closest ally. At 82 years old, she'd always been the voice of reason and fairness in our family, someone who treated all her grandchildren equally and seemed to see through everyone's manipulations and games. When she called asking to meet for lunch, I assumed she wanted to discuss the family conflict and perhaps offer guidance for resolving our differences peacefully. Instead, Grandma Rose revealed that she'd been working with my parents throughout the entire conflict, providing them with information about my emotional state and strategic advice for pressuring me into compliance. She'd been reporting our private conversations back to them, including details about my financial stress, career concerns, and growing isolation. Worse, she'd convinced several extended family members to shun me by painting me as ungrateful and vindictive, someone who'd forgotten her family values and needed to be taught humility. "Your parents are worried sick about you, Samantha," she said over tea and sandwiches, her voice carrying the same disappointed tone I'd heard from everyone else. "This behavior isn't like you. You've always been such a giving, generous person. I think maybe success has changed you in ways you don't realize." The conversation felt like a rehearsed intervention rather than a genuine family discussion, with Grandma Rose hitting talking points that perfectly aligned with my parents' manipulation tactics. Her betrayal was particularly crushing because it isolated me from the extended family members who might have provided support or objective perspectives on our conflict. Cousins who'd previously been friendly became distant and judgmental, convinced by Grandma Rose's version of events that I'd become selfish and cruel. The annual family reunion was approaching, and word spread through our extended network that I was no longer welcome at gatherings, effectively exiling me from family traditions I'd participated in for nearly 3 decades. The professional investigation at my workplace intensified as Derek's false accusations gained credibility through repetition and embellishment. He'd contacted not just my direct supervisor but several clients, planting seeds of doubt about my character and reliability that threatened years of relationship building and professional development. My boss called me into a meeting where he expressed concern about the personal issues that seemed to be affecting my work, suggesting I take extended leave to resolve these family matters before they damaged the company's reputation. Madison's restraining order hearing became a public spectacle where our entire family dysfunction was displayed for court officials and legal observers. Her lawyer painted me as an unstable cyberstalker who'd been systematically harassing his client through social media campaigns and financial manipulation. The false narrative was so detailed and convincing that I began to doubt my own memories of events, wondering if my perspective had been distorted by stress and anger. The cumulative effect of these coordinated attacks left me feeling completely isolated and questioning everything I thought I knew about my family relationships. Sleep became impossible as I replayed conversations and interactions, searching for signs of deception I'd missed over the years. Panic attacks struck at random moments, leaving me gasping for breath and questioning my sanity as the people I'd trusted most revealed themselves to be sophisticated manipulators capable of extraordinary cruelty. My savings account, the symbol of my independence and security, felt more like a target painted on my back than an achievement to be proud of. Every day brought new demands, threats, and manipulations designed to separate me from my financial security and force me into compliance with their escalating expectations. But even as I reached my lowest point, drowning in their collective assault on my sanity and stability, an unexpected ally was about to emerge from the most unlikely source imaginable. Richard Wellington's phone call came at my darkest hour, when the combined assault from my family had left me questioning my own sanity and considering capitulation just to make the nightmare stop. His voice was calm and professional, introducing himself as Madison's former associate and requesting a private meeting to discuss matters of mutual interest. My initial reaction was suspicion, assuming this was another trap orchestrated by my family to extract information or gain leverage in our ongoing war. Our meeting took place in a quiet coffee shop downtown, where Richard's appearance immediately challenged my assumptions about Madison's sugar daddy arrangement. At 55 years old, he was distinguished and clearly wealthy, but his demeanor suggested intelligence and integrity rather than the desperate older man being manipulated by a young woman that I'd imagined. His opening statement shocked me. "Your sister has been running elaborate financial scams on multiple victims, and I believe you deserve to know the truth about what you've been unknowingly funding for years." Richard's story unfolded like a criminal investigation report, complete with documentation that painted Madison as a sophisticated con artist rather than a spoiled young woman making poor choices. The fake pregnancy that had cost him $50,000 included forged medical documents, staged doctor appointments with actors, and an elaborate miscarriage story complete with hospital bills and emotional trauma that had extracted additional sympathy money. Her performance had been so convincing that Richard had never suspected deception until accidentally discovering she was simultaneously running identical scams on 3 other wealthy men. The evidence Richard provided extended far beyond his personal experience with Madison's crimes. He'd hired a private investigator who'd uncovered a network of victims spanning several years, each one targeted through carefully researched social media profiles that identified wealthy, lonely men vulnerable to Madison's specific brand of manipulation. Her methods were sophisticated, involving fake social media personas, elaborate backstories about family tragedies and medical emergencies, and emotional manipulation techniques that suggested either natural talent or professional training in psychological manipulation. Ashley's examination of Richard's evidence revealed patterns that explained my family's financial behavior over the past several years. The timing of Madison's various scams coincided perfectly with my family's increased demands for financial assistance, suggesting they'd been using my money to cover Madison's living expenses while she focused on her criminal enterprises. Derek's business problems weren't caused by market conditions but by his role as Madison's money launderer, cleaning her scam proceeds through legitimate business transactions that eventually attracted attention from financial institutions. Derek's knowledge of Madison's criminal activities wasn't limited to passive assistance with money laundering. Richard's investigator had uncovered evidence that Derek helped Madison research potential victims, providing business intelligence and financial background checks that allowed her to target the wealthiest and most vulnerable marks. His betrayal of my confidence about my savings account wasn't spontaneous anger but strategic intelligence gathering that helped Madison's operation understand the full scope of my financial resources. The revelation that my parents knew about Madison's criminal activities was perhaps the most devastating discovery of all. Bank records showed they'd received regular payments from Madison's various schemes, money that funded their comfortable retirement lifestyle while they claimed financial hardship to justify their demands for my contributions. Their manipulation tactics weren't just greedy entitlement but active participation in a criminal conspiracy that used emotional abuse to supplement illegal income streams. Grandma Rose's betrayal took on new dimensions when Richard's investigation revealed she'd been providing strategic advice for the family's manipulation campaigns. Her decades of experience managing family dynamics and understanding everyone's psychological vulnerabilities made her an invaluable advisor for crafting pressure tactics specifically designed to break down my resistance. Her position as the trusted family matriarch gave her unique access to information and influence that made her the perfect coordinator for their coordinated assault on my emotional stability. The scope of my family's deception extended beyond financial crimes into systematic psychological abuse designed to maintain my role as their primary funding source. Every family gathering, holiday celebration, and casual interaction had been carefully orchestrated to reinforce my feelings of obligation and guilt while preventing me from developing the confidence or external relationships that might have helped me recognize their manipulation. Their treatment of me wasn't just favoritism toward Madison but deliberate isolation designed to maintain my financial compliance. Ashley's legal analysis of the evidence confirmed that my family's activities constituted multiple felonies including conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and organized financial abuse. The documented evidence was sufficient to support criminal charges that could result in significant prison time for the primary participants, particularly Madison and Derek, whose roles as active criminals were clearly established. More importantly for my immediate situation, the evidence provided grounds for civil lawsuits that could recover years of stolen money plus punitive damages. Richard's motivation for sharing this information surprised me with its genuine concern for justice rather than personal revenge. He'd already recovered his stolen money through civil litigation that Madison couldn't contest without admitting criminal behavior, but he'd continued investigating to ensure other victims received justice and to prevent her from targeting additional people. His offer to testify in any legal proceedings I chose to pursue came without strings attached, driven by moral outrage at the systematic abuse I'd endured while unknowingly funding criminal enterprises. The documentation Richard provided included communications between Madison and Derek discussing strategies for increasing their extraction of money from me, conversations that revealed the calculated cruelty behind their emotional manipulation campaigns. They discussed my psychological vulnerabilities, debated the most effective guilt tactics, and planned escalating pressure campaigns designed to break my resistance without pushing me to complete no contact. Reading their clinical analysis of my emotional weaknesses felt like discovering that people I'd loved had been conducting psychological experiments on me for entertainment and profit. Armed with this evidence, I finally understood that my family's behavior wasn't just dysfunctional relationship dynamics but organized criminal activity that had targeted me as their primary victim. The guilt, confusion, and self-doubt that had plagued me for months dissolved into crystal clear anger and determination to ensure they faced consequences for their crimes. But more than personal vindication, I felt a responsibility to prevent them from targeting other victims who might not have the resources or support system needed to fight back effectively. Ashley's lawsuit against my family marked the beginning of their complete downfall, a carefully orchestrated legal campaign that targeted every aspect of their criminal enterprise while protecting me from further harassment. The civil case included claims for financial fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, and violation of consumer protection laws that carried both monetary damages and injunctive relief. More importantly, the evidence we presented to prosecutors resulted in criminal investigations that would ultimately send several family members to prison for their various crimes. Madison's arrest came first, executed during what she thought was a routine meeting with another potential victim that turned out to be an undercover police detective. The sight of my entitled little sister in handcuffs, being led away while crying about misunderstandings and family conflicts, provided a satisfaction that years of therapy couldn't have achieved. Her elaborate social media persona crumbled as news outlets picked up the story of the young woman who'd scammed hundreds of thousands of dollars from lonely older men while manipulating her own family for additional funding. Derek's business license suspension followed quickly as state regulators investigated the money laundering activities that had funded Madison's lifestyle while draining his company's legitimate assets. His professional reputation in our business community evaporated overnight as clients learned about his involvement in criminal enterprises and his documented efforts to sabotage his own sister's career through fabricated accusations. The divorce papers Jennifer filed cited criminal behavior and financial deception as grounds, leaving Derek facing both legal consequences and personal destruction. Our parents' community standing collapsed when local newspapers picked up the story of their involvement in their daughter's criminal activities and their systematic financial abuse of their other daughter. The church where they'd held leadership positions quietly asked them to step down, and the various charitable organizations they'd been involved with distanced themselves from the scandal. Their social circle, built over decades of careful community involvement, dissolved as friends and neighbors learned about their true character through detailed media coverage of the legal proceedings. The civil lawsuit's discovery process revealed the full scope of their financial crimes, including evidence that they'd been planning to escalate their demands on me to include investment in a fake business venture that would have given them access to my entire savings account. Email communications between family members discussed strategies for isolating me from potential allies and increasing my emotional dependence on their approval, tactics that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of psychological manipulation techniques. Grandma Rose's reputation as the beloved family matriarch disintegrated when other grandchildren learned about her role in coordinating the psychological abuse campaign against me. Her own children, my aunts and uncles, were horrified to discover that their mother had been manipulating family relationships for financial gain and actively participating in criminal conspiracies. The extended family meeting where these revelations emerged resulted in several relatives cutting contact with her entirely, leaving her isolated in the assisted living facility where her declining health had recently placed her. The financial restitution ordered by the court exceeded my wildest expectations for justice, including not just the return of money I'd given them over the years but punitive damages that reflected the systematic nature of their abuse. Madison was ordered to pay $200,000 in damages, money that would come from the sale of assets purchased with her scam proceeds. Derek faced similar financial penalties that forced him to liquidate his remaining business assets and personal property to satisfy the judgment against him. My workplace investigation concluded with a formal apology from company leadership and a promotion that acknowledged the professional damage I'd suffered through Derek's false accusations. The evidence of his fabricated claims led to a secondary lawsuit for defamation and interference with business relationships that would continue generating financial consequences for years to come. Several clients who'd been influenced by his lies reached out to apologize and strengthen their business relationships with me, recognizing that they'd been manipulated by someone with criminal motivations. The criminal cases moved forward simultaneously with the civil litigation, creating additional pressure that prevented my family from mounting effective defenses in either proceeding. Madison's plea negotiations collapsed when prosecutors discovered additional victims and charges that multiplied her potential prison time beyond anything her lawyer could reasonably contest. Derek's cooperation with investigators in exchange for reduced charges provided evidence that implicated our parents in conspiracy charges that carried their own serious penalties. Richard Wellington's testimony proved crucial in establishing the scope of Madison's criminal enterprise and demonstrating the sophisticated planning that elevated her crimes from simple fraud to organized criminal activity. His detailed documentation of her methods and the evidence he'd gathered about other victims helped prosecutors build cases that would prevent her from targeting additional people even after her eventual release from prison. His moral courage in testifying despite having already recovered his stolen money impressed judges and juries while highlighting the contrast between his character and my family's criminal behavior. The media attention surrounding the case brought unexpected benefits as other victims of similar family financial abuse reached out to share their stories and seek guidance for their own situations. Ashley and I began developing resources for people trapped in comparable situations, work that evolved into a consulting practice specializing in family financial abuse cases. The purpose this gave to my terrible experience helped transform personal trauma into professional mission that has since helped hundreds of families navigate similar crises. Community reaction to the case highlighted how my family's manipulation tactics had been visible to outside observers even when I couldn't recognize them myself. Neighbors, church members, and business associates shared stories of feeling uncomfortable with my family's treatment of me at various gatherings, observations that validated my perceptions while revealing how systematic abuse often leaves victims feeling isolated even when others recognize the problematic behavior. The social destruction that followed their legal defeats was swift and comprehensive, leaving my family completely ostracized from the community connections they'd cultivated for decades. Madison's former friends deleted her from social media and refused to associate with someone involved in criminal activities. Derek's business network evaporated as professional contacts realized that maintaining relationships with convicted criminals would damage their own reputations. Our parents found themselves excluded from social groups and community organizations where their presence had once been welcomed and valued. My family's last desperate attempt at reconciliation came on my 29th birthday, a coordinated ambush that proved they'd learned nothing from their legal defeats and criminal convictions. Despite active restraining orders and pending appeals of their criminal sentences, they organized a family intervention at my apartment building that included extended relatives who'd been manipulated into believing their version of events. The sight of them gathered in my building's lobby, led by Derek despite his pending prison sentence, demonstrated the delusional entitlement that had driven their criminal behavior from the beginning. Madison's performance reached new heights of theatrical manipulation as she staged what appeared to be a medical emergency in my building's parking garage, complete with paramedics who'd been called for what turned out to be a panic attack brought on by my continued refusal to forgive their systematic abuse. Her dramatic collapse was clearly timed to occur just as I was returning from work, creating a scene designed to make me appear heartless for not rushing to her aid. The elaborate staging suggested they'd planned this confrontation with the same attention to detail they'd applied to their criminal enterprises. My response was swift and decisive, calling 911 to report trespassing violations by people under active restraining orders rather than engaging with their emotional manipulations. The police response was immediate and professional, with officers who'd become familiar with the case through previous incidents taking statements from building security and witnesses who'd observed the coordinated harassment. The presence of extended family members who'd been deceived into participating provided additional evidence of ongoing conspiracy to violate court orders designed to protect me from further abuse. Ashley's legal strategy had anticipated this exact scenario, and she'd prepared comprehensive documentation that allowed prosecutors to file additional charges for restraining order violations and witness intimidation. The fact that they'd involved innocent extended family members in their scheme by lying about the nature of their visit demonstrated ongoing deception that undermined any claims of genuine remorse or rehabilitation. Their willingness to continue criminal behavior even while facing prison sentences proved they posed ongoing threats to my safety and well-being. The court's response to these violations was severe, with judges expressing frustration at defendants who continued committing crimes while their appeals were pending. Madison's medical emergency performance was exposed when hospital records showed no legitimate health crisis, revealing another layer of deception designed to manipulate emergency responders and create false evidence of my supposed cruelty. The judge's comments during sentencing acknowledged the sophisticated manipulation tactics my family had employed and the importance of preventing similar abuse of other victims. Extended family members who'd been manipulated into participating in the confrontation became valuable witnesses once they understood the true nature of the situation they'd been deceived into supporting. Their testimony about the lies they'd been told and the pressure tactics used to secure their cooperation provided additional evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy that resulted in enhanced penalties for the primary defendants. Several relatives apologized privately for their participation, acknowledging that they'd been manipulated by people they'd trusted to tell them the truth. Derek's cooperation with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences provided the final pieces of evidence needed to understand the full scope of their criminal enterprise. His detailed testimony revealed planning documents, communication strategies, and financial arrangements that demonstrated years of systematic criminal activity designed to extract money from me while preventing me from recognizing the abuse. His willingness to testify against other family members, including our parents, illustrated the complete breakdown of family loyalty that their criminal behavior had created. The financial audit Ashley conducted revealed the true cost of their systematic abuse, totaling over $200,000 when interest and opportunity costs were included in the calculation. This money had funded not just their comfortable lifestyles but active criminal enterprises that targeted additional victims, making me an unwitting accomplice to crimes that had devastated multiple families. The scope of the financial damage provided context for the substantial restitution orders that would ensure they faced ongoing consequences for their actions. Madison's sentencing hearing included victim impact statements from multiple people who'd been targeted by her scams, creating a comprehensive picture of the human cost of her criminal activities. My own statement focused on the systematic family abuse rather than individual crimes, highlighting how their manipulation tactics could be adapted to target other vulnerable family members who lacked resources to fight back effectively. The judge's comments acknowledged the broader social implications of family financial abuse and the importance of deterrent sentences that would prevent similar crimes. Derek's business failure was complete by the time his criminal case concluded, with bankruptcy proceedings that liquidated all remaining assets to satisfy civil judgments and criminal restitution orders. His professional licenses were permanently revoked, and he faced ongoing civil litigation from business partners and clients who'd been damaged by his criminal activities. The total destruction of his career and financial security demonstrated the long-term consequences of participating in criminal conspiracies for short-term financial gain. Our parents' criminal sentences were reduced due to their advanced age and health conditions, but the social and financial consequences were severe enough to ensure they'd never recover their previous standard of living or community standing. The sale of their home and other assets to satisfy restitution orders forced them into modest housing while their reputations in the community remained permanently damaged by their criminal convictions. Their church membership was formally terminated, and various social organizations they'd participated in for decades quietly excluded them from future activities. The complete legal victory provided validation that my initial refusal to pay Madison's car repair bill had been not just justified but morally necessary to prevent funding ongoing criminal activities. The evidence presented during various legal proceedings demonstrated that capitulating to their demands would have enabled additional crimes against other victims while reinforcing their belief that family relationships could be weaponized for financial gain. My decision to fight back rather than submit had ultimately protected not just my own financial security but prevented unknown numbers of future victims from being targeted by their criminal enterprise. 1 year after that devastating Christmas dinner, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined when I first received that outrageous $25,000 bill. Sitting in my new apartment, decorated for my first holiday season of complete freedom from family manipulation, I reflected on the journey from financial victim to empowered survivor while preparing to host a celebration with my chosen family of friends and allies who'd supported me through the darkest period of my life. My career had not just recovered but flourished beyond my previous achievements, with a promotion to director level that recognized both my professional capabilities and the strength I'd demonstrated throughout the legal battles with my family. The consulting practice Ashley and I had developed was helping dozens of families recognize and escape similar patterns of financial abuse, work that gave meaning to my personal trauma while generating additional income that secured my financial independence permanently. Speaking engagements at legal conferences and family therapy organizations had established me as an expert in recognizing and combating family financial abuse. The financial restitution from various legal judgments had not just restored my savings account but provided resources for investments and charitable giving that reflected my values rather than family obligations. Contributing to organizations that helped domestic violence and financial abuse victims felt infinitely more rewarding than funding my family's criminal enterprises, and the tax benefits of charitable giving provided practical advantages that my family's demands never offered. My money was finally being used for purposes that aligned with my principles rather than enabling people who viewed me as an ATM. Ashley's friendship had deepened into a professional partnership that combined her legal expertise with my first-hand experience of financial abuse to create resources that filled a genuine need in our community. Our consulting practice had helped families recover millions of dollars in stolen assets while providing emotional support for people who'd been isolated and manipulated by relatives they'd trusted. The work was emotionally challenging but provided purpose that transformed my personal trauma into professional mission dedicated to preventing similar abuse of other victims. Richard Wellington had become an unexpected mentor whose business acumen and moral courage provided guidance for both my career development and my charitable activities. His willingness to testify against Madison despite having recovered his stolen money demonstrated the importance of standing up for justice even when personal interests didn't require such courage. Our professional relationship had evolved into friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to preventing financial predators from targeting vulnerable people. My apartment reflected the peace and security I'd built through enforcing boundaries and refusing to compromise with people who demonstrated their willingness to cause me harm. The holiday decorations were chosen for my personal enjoyment rather than family expectations, and the dinner menu represented foods I genuinely enjoyed rather than traditions maintained for people who'd never appreciated my efforts. The guest list included people who valued me for my character rather than my bank account, relationships built on mutual support rather than one-sided financial extraction. The extended family relationships that had survived the revelations about my parents and siblings were stronger for having been tested by crisis and truth-telling. Cousins and relatives who'd initially been manipulated by Grandma Rose's lies had apologized sincerely once they understood the reality of my situation, and several had shared their own experiences of subtle financial pressure from family members that helped them recognize similar patterns in their own lives. These relationships were now based on honest communication rather than the careful social management that had characterized previous family interactions. Professional success had brought opportunities to share my story through media interviews and published articles that reached people who might be experiencing similar abuse but lacked frameworks for understanding their situations. The response from readers and viewers had been overwhelming, with hundreds of people reaching out to share their stories and seek guidance for escaping their own family financial abuse situations. These connections had created a community of survivors who supported each other while working to raise awareness about the prevalence and serious consequences of family financial manipulation. The legal precedents established through our various lawsuits had strengthened protections for other victims of family financial abuse while creating consequences that deterred similar crimes. Madison remained in prison with several years remaining on her sentence, time she was reportedly spending in therapy and educational programs that might eventually prepare her for legitimate employment upon release. Derek's bankruptcy and professional sanctions would prevent him from rebuilding the kind of business that could be used for money laundering, while ongoing civil litigation continued generating financial consequences for his criminal activities. My parents' isolation and reduced circumstances served as visible reminders to our community about the costs of prioritizing criminal gain over family relationships and basic human decency. Their appeals of criminal convictions had been unsuccessful, and the financial judgments against them would continue affecting their lifestyle for the remainder of their lives. Grandma Rose's declining health and social isolation reflected the consequences of choosing to participate in criminal conspiracies rather than providing the wise guidance her position should have represented. The anniversary of that first terrible Christmas dinner provided an opportunity to celebrate not just personal victory but the broader principle that families don't have unlimited rights to exploit and abuse their members for financial gain. My decision to refuse payment for Madison's car repairs had ultimately saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars while preventing funding of criminal enterprises that would have targeted additional victims. The strength required to maintain boundaries despite coordinated family pressure had developed into confidence that benefited every area of my life. Therapeutic work with specialists in family trauma had helped me understand the psychological dynamics that had made me vulnerable to systematic manipulation while developing tools for recognizing and resisting similar tactics in other relationships. The healing process had been challenging but ultimately rewarding, replacing guilt and obligation with healthy boundaries and self-respect that protected me from people who might attempt to exploit my success or generosity for their own benefit. Christmas morning in my peaceful apartment, surrounded by cards from grateful consulting clients and gifts from friends who appreciated my authentic self rather than my bank account, I felt gratitude for the courage that had carried me through the worst period of my life toward the freedom and security I now enjoyed. The silence of my phone, free from demanding family messages and guilt-inducing communications, represented victory over people who'd attempted to define my worth through financial compliance rather than personal character. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever felt pressured by family members who seem to value your money more than your well-being? Share your stories in the comments below, because recognizing these patterns is the first step toward protecting yourself and others from family financial abuse. Please like this video if it helped you understand the warning signs of financial manipulation, subscribe for more stories about overcoming toxic family dynamics, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with relatives who refuse to respect your financial independence. Remember that healthy families support each other's success rather than attempting to exploit it, and you deserve relationships based on love and respect rather than financial obligation. Thank you for joining me on this journey from victim to survivor, and I hope my story helps you recognize your own worth and power in whatever family challenges you might be facing.